too.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Wendy Rose Williams, and we're so happy you're joining Gregg, Kirk, and I here on the Waking Up Spiritually podcast, whether it's live or whether you'll be joining us via the recorded archive. And today's topic is one of my favorite. It's a fun topic regarding waking up spiritually, and how perfect to take us back to the name of our own podcast and website and Facebook group. So Gregg and I are going to share those stories, and the purpose of doing so is to help you understand and recognize you may have been going through some of that process yourself and just not been able to make sense of it, perhaps. We hope to bring a deeper level of understanding to that. And my website is my full name, wendyrosewilliams.com. I'm a past life adventure guide who trained with Dr. Brian Weiss, the author of Many Lives, Many Masters, and I'm also a certified spiritual teacher. So Gregg, you have been awake longer than me. Do you want to kick off with some of your background and your story and what happened for you? And then we can just go back and forth, and certainly happy to entertain questions and comments of people who want to share their story too.
Absolutely. And just real quick, you can find me at greggkirk.com. If you're looking for what I do, I'm a spiritual healer, a light worker, energy worker, whatever you want to call. I do remote sessions, been doing them a lot more recently because it's tougher to get in front of people. But I am actually opening business hours next week, or actually at the end of this week. But yeah, greggkirk.com. So how did I wake up? Well, I didn't even know that was something that somebody could do. Until I saw the movie My Dinner with Andre in 1981. So that movie literally referred to the idea of people being asleep and some people waking up. And it struck such a chord with me, it never left. So I know some people have what's called triggers. They kind of get them going. Now, of course, I didn't actually wake up until later, but that was kind of like the first time I heard any alarm bells. And I highly recommend people watch it. I'll share a link to probably I've actually found the 3 minutes of the movie that had such a profound effect on me. It's and the movie itself is just a fantastic movie. It was created by Andre Gregory and Wally Shaw back in 1981. Just the release of it by itself was groundbreaking, because it was literally just a conversation of two guys at dinner. So that was an unusual thing in and of itself, and a lot of critics focus on that. What they don't focus on is what they're actually talking about, which is mind-bending. And it's really about how this guy, Andre Gregory, has been living his life, which is outside the norm, on the fringes of society. And in particular, he's been meeting all these amazing, open-minded and spiritually based people who have influenced his actions. It appealed a lot to me, but the part of the movie where he started talking about, somebody came up to him one day and said, "Hey, I hear you're living in New York City." And, Andre said, "Yes." He said, "Have you ever noticed that everybody who lives in New York City talks about leaving and how much they don't like it, but nobody does anything about it?" And Andre said, "Yes, that's true. Me too." And he said, "Well, that's because, have you ever thought of the idea that there's a global society that's trying to keep people down, and that New York City is actually a prison that was built by the inmates, and that nobody knows that they're in this prison. It's a prison of their own making that they're actually very proud of, but only those who understand." And actually, that's when he coins the term being asleep. He said, nobody's even aware of it. And that those who wake up, realize what's going on, and they can leave. And the guy hands Andre, I believe, a pine cone. He said, "This is going to be a pine tree someday. Get out while you can." So anyway, it's very good. It opened my eyes. I thought, wow, I wrote a song about it, back when I first started songwriting, called Sleepwalk World. I thought, most of the world is in fact sleepwalking, and only, certain people wake up. Well, I still didn't do anything about it until I started having experiences, maybe about 10 years later. So my waking up period didn't occur until I started having experiences. And I think, Wendy, that's probably how you woke up. And also myself, I was open to the idea of things of the supernatural. I thought I'd seen some possible UFO occurrences. I knew people who had experiences with ghosts. And I was open to all that. I wasn't, crazy about it. I just thought, all right, I think there are different possibilities that we only see 1% of the light spectrum is what I hear. So there's 99% of what we're experiencing outside of our spectrum of what our senses can understand. So I thought, all right, I can understand that. But it wasn't until I started having actual experiences and still, I was stubborn. I didn't wake all the way up until I went to Brazil. So what happens in these situations is when you don't wake up, your guides start putting more obstacles in your path to wake you up. And
shake you to wake you.
That's a perfect saying. Yes. So my experience with that was Lyme disease, which I contracted probably in 2002 or 2003. Didn't get diagnosed till 2005. And then spent the next almost 10 years battling it and going through an epiphany of, the full range of what did I do to deserve this? I'm going to die. I don't care if I die. It'd be great if I died. And literally giving everything up or feeling like I had lost everything, felt my life had burnt to the ground, and I was still hanging around. I'm like, why am I still hanging around? Why haven't I died? And then suddenly the things started happening. And I'd say two pivotal moments. One, going to Brazil, seeing the healer John of God, having a life-changing moment that physically changed me. I mean, there was physical evidence that something changed with the disease. So the disease went away. My physical appearance, I looked different when I came back. That was a big one. And then prior to that, I had another experience with a healer who did a remote healing over the phone with me. And I experienced a physical change during that as well. So this happened a few years prior to going to see John of God. I think it happened 5 years before. And this healer told me over the phone that I would start doing what he was doing. And that seemed ludicrous to me.
And what was your response? How did you feel about that?
I just kind of laughed, like, okay, whatever. Because I was taking in the fact that my vision was changing. The depression I'd had for 6 years just evaporated. And he was saying all these really nice things about me. He says, I'm talking to your guides and they're telling me you're more special than I know. And you're like family in heaven and you've got a connection to the Holy Family. I mean, who doesn't want to hear that stuff? That's great. But did I believe it? I don't know. Not
almost too much to take in.
It was a lot of information all at once because of the physical things I was also taking in. So he said I was going to write a book. I mean, he predicted my life for what was going to unfold in the next 10 years. So that was big. And then I went to Brazil and then more stuff happened. And then I would say within a few years after going to Brazil, my life started unfolding as this guy predicted. And
Gregg, didn't that take multiple trips to Brazil to John of God? You didn't go one time.
No, I didn't. Yeah. So what I started to find out was, so when I was in Brazil, I thought, okay, I woke up. I'm done.
Snap your fingers.
Yes. And so for those of you who are waking up, you can either corroborate this idea or you will experience it if you haven't already. That you have this profound moment where you think, wow, I'm awake. I see the way things are. I'm magical or whatever. I'm experiencing crazy, wild, supernatural things, and that's great. And that's it. And, you know, there's a saying Wendy and I were talking about before we came on, which is a great saying, where before enlightenment, I chop wood, I carry water. After enlightenment, I chop wood, I carry water. So that's more or less what happened to me, where I had this profound experience. I came back just like, I'm a different guy now, and everything's gonna change. And then when I went back to my world that had not changed, you know, there was a huge clash. And I actually started to feel sick again because of that. I went back to a job that was toxic. There were some toxic people in my life, and I didn't change anything to maintain the light that I had received in Brazil.
Greg, how long was it when you returned from Brazil the first time and had changed so much and felt so much better and you could physically see the healing? How long did it take you to start to feel not well again once you returned to everything the same without making changes? Was it days, weeks, months?
It was about 6 months. Yeah, so I held the light for about 6 months, and then I was doing nothing to maintain it. That I didn't know that. So I wasn't doing anything like a daily practice. I wasn't even meditating regularly. I was eating processed foods. You know, I was living what most Americans would call a normal life. But once you have, I would say, once you have an awakening that's related to your health, you really better pay attention to that, because your health will be the bellwether indicator. Exactly. So I went back, and then another thing happened to me. I went back 2 other times, and just keep in mind, it's a 10-hour flight down there. It costs about $3,000 each time. I would have to leave my family for 2 weeks at a time. This was not an easy thing to do. For a number of reasons. So by the third time I went down there, some people started recognizing me in the little town of Brazil. And one woman came up to me and said, "Oh, it's good to see you here again. I guess you're going to come back every year to recharge," which seemed like a nice thing to say to somebody, but I took it as a negative trigger. I thought, haven't I learned anything down here? The energy that I'm experiencing here, they let you experience it the first time in an easy way, to let you know it's possible. But after that, you have to learn how to hold it. The energy and the light that I was connecting to is universal. Why would you have to go to Brazil every time? You know, if that were the case, everybody would be going just to that place. There's many places in the world where people can experience these things. The veil has thinned down there, so it is a supernatural place, but it is easier for you to experience this kind of stuff. But, you know, you need to get along and live your life other parts of the planet and with the different scenarios. So I did go down 3 more times over the course of 5 years, but I did so I stopped asking for healing. I started asking for spiritual evolution, as they called it down there. Mm-hmm. And that was profound. The healing was a side effect at that point. So I got the healing anyway. They told me that. They said, if you start focusing on raising your vibration, holding the light, spiritually advancing, everything's going to work itself out. So after that, the only reason I went, John of God started coming up to the Omega Center not far from me in Rhinebeck, New York, and I started bringing people there. I was the guide, and I was not asking for healing anymore. So that said, I've gone through several ups and downs, you know, since then. That was about 2014, 15. And always reminded that don't ever get complacent or think you're too big for your britches or think you know it all. You don't ever know it all. You know, the greatest, if you want to call them gurus or the best spiritual minds in the world, always say they are always, you always learn. People always have something to teach you. Experiences always have something to teach you. So once you have that mindset that you're not ever complete in this journey, then you'll realize that each new experience that you have is a lesson. Each new person you meet has a lesson to teach you. And, that the only constant in life is change. So you better get ready for the change and roll with it, or you're going to have a hard time. So that's my, and if you want to find out more about the story, this is a crass plug, but my book, I wrote about it. Well, whatever, it doesn't have to be a crass plug. It's, if you are interested in this, I wrote about it in my book, The Gratitude Curve. It really, I detail all of this stuff. And, the point being is I was eventually grateful for it. Even though, many people would look at what I went through and say, you wanted to die, for God's sake. How can you be grateful for that? Well, because it brought me to where I am today. I didn't die. I don't want to die anymore. When my time comes, I'll be ready to go. But, everything happened, for a reason. And I'm good with all of it. I would not want to go back and change anything. So, anyway, so check that out, The Gratitude Curve. You can find that actually on greggkirk.com. But
The Gratitude Curve, it's a fantastic book, Gregg. It's just so well written, and it's so honest, and it was a really challenging journey, and I applaud you for sharing it, because I think it gives inspiration and strength to a lot of other people, to have realized how incredibly ill you were, and what it took to climb out of that. I mean, that was really a big deal. And
yeah.
then it wasn't an easy book to write. I know you spent years writing it. People think we whip these books out in a month or two, and that's often not the process. It can be literally years, because
it started as
so
a diary.
Much energy.
Well, because it started as a diary, because I didn't know if I was going to live, honestly. So I wanted my family to have something in case I did die. So I started writing it in my worst moment in 2007, when I thought I was going to die, and I wanted to. So I started it that way. So it wasn't until years later, when I got through all this, I thought, oh, let me look at this stuff again. And then I began kind of revisiting the whole experiences and writing it. And so it did, it did take about a year to pull it all together, but yeah, it took years and years to chronicle it. But thank you for the kind words about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's hear about you.
Well, I've got some interesting parallels, because we've never really had this discussion in depth before. And my first parallel is I had that precursor, like you did with the film, all the way back in '81. Wouldn't you have just been in high school or college? I mean, you were young at that time. Have had that little, it was like a little place marker, maybe.
Yeah.
And for me, that place marker to waking up spiritually. And what I mean by that is, for me, it's to realize that our souls are eternal, and that what we're doing here on earth is not just a one-time gig. My personal belief is we reincarnate many times, many places, many planets, many life forms are all possible for our soul, our eternal soul, to learn and to progress and to raise our vibration and frequency, as Gregg pointed out. So for me, there was a big catalyst in, would have been August of 1997. I was pregnant with my second daughter, which was a very big deal. I was overjoyed. We did have a daughter. Our older daughter was about 18 months old, but I'd been through years of infertility, and I'd also lost 2 pregnancies that were ectopic pregnancies. So it was a really big deal, and I was incredibly happy to be pregnant again. And I was just at the end of the first trimester, so around 10 weeks, working at home full time, and I'm just not feeling right. And this goes on for days and days. And I keep calling the OB, because I knew each pregnancy could be different, but I had been pregnant 3 times. This was my 4th time. So I had some track record of what it feels like, and something just didn't feel right. I had this incredible heartburn. So I kept calling the OB, and they're like, oh, that's really early in the pregnancy for that. But, we don't need to see you. You just keep doing your scheduled visits. You're doing fine. Take some Mylanta. Mylanta is perfectly fine. And I was also having what I didn't recognize were precognitive dreams, because I didn't know what those were. And I did know I was having really vivid dreams, but I knew that could also be pregnancy related. Sometimes you just have wacky, vivid dreams while you're pregnant, just because there's a lot going on hormonally and a lot of changes coming up in your life. But I kept dreaming about these ships out at sea, and there was these terrible storms, and things kept like ripping and tearing, and like the ropes would tear away and the cleats would tear away and the masts would fall. And it was like, gosh, what is all with these like turbulent seas and ripping and tearing, was my concept of it. So I end up having an NDE while I'm at home alone. And I'll just tell it in a sentence or two to not take too much time. But the fundus, which is the uterus, at the top of the uterus, it's an aorta. It ripped, it tore, it burst, and I felt it. It was the worst pain of my life. I looked down, I literally thought someone has stabbed me in the gut with a knife, because it hurt so much. I passed out. And when I woke up, I thought, oh my gosh, my gallbladder, my appendix, something burst. I could feel an organ had torn. And I thought, oh, that's what all those dreams were. And I couldn't move. I was just laying on the floor and thought, okay, this is it. I'm done. I'm home alone. I've got no car. I've got no cell phone. I'm done. And I felt angels come in for the first time and just come all around me, which was just beautiful and fascinating and honestly kind of distracting, because I hadn't had that kind of an experience. But one of them very specifically said to me, you need to get up now, you need to go to the phone, and you need to call for help, or you're going to go home. And I knew they meant drop my body, pass on. And I said, I can't possibly walk to the phone from the bathroom to the bedroom. I mean, it was only about 10 steps. And they said, we know you can't walk. We're going to help you. Just get on your hands and knees. That's all you have to do. And we'll take it from there. So I did get on my hands and knees, and it was like being lifted. It was so easy to get to the phone crawling. And I didn't think to call 911. I'd never called 911 in my life. Just the angel didn't say call 911. The angel said, get to the phone.
Right.
So I called my husband at work. I had never reached my husband at work in my life, but he worked 5 minutes from home. That's the only time that's ever happened. I reached him immediately and said, 911, distress call. I need you to drive me to the hospital now. And he didn't ask me a single question. He said, be at the front door. That was it, which again was unusual, to not have to have a discussion about it. And I called the OB office, and they were also specific. They said, come straight to our office, which was at the hospital. They said, do not try and park. Just throw your car in at the OB entrance. We'll meet you there with a wheelchair. Do not walk. So I'm like, okay, I got to get to the car, but we'll let go of that piece. And it was a tremendous experience. I was bleeding out. They estimated I lost 3/4 of my blood that week in the hospital. They could not transfuse blood quickly enough, because it was an aorta. I mean, my abdomen was just going up, and I looked about 6 months pregnant. And I had not been showing, but within a couple of days, I'm looking down at my belly going, holy crap, this is not good. Because it was the blood loss. So it's pooling in my abdomen where it shouldn't be. So did have surgery, and I did have a beautiful NDE where I just went up this tremendously long escalator the night before the surgery. I had the surgery after about 4 days in the hospital, because they didn't want to operate. I didn't want them to operate. I'm pregnant. They're giving me
Had a second
morphine.
NDE?
Well, no. I consider that week an NDE, honestly.
Right.
It was that entire week. I mean, it was what happened at home and, what it led to. It wasn't a 5-minute moment in time.
Yeah.
But so I've been in the hospital 3 or 4 days. I float out of my body the night before the surgery. I'd been asleep for a little while, and I was just trying to rest before the surgery, which was scheduled for early in the morning. And I floated out of my body, And I looked back at myself, and it was funny because there was some humor to it. And I looked at myself and I'm like, wow. And I noticed I was calling myself she. I was very disassociated from my body. It felt so great to be out of my body and have no more pain, because the IV was really painful because they were trying to pump so much blood in, and my abdomen hurt like crazy. And it was just so painful. I was so glad to be out. But I did look at my body and I'm like, my gosh, she's in a bad way. She's whiter than the sheets. And oh my gosh, couldn't they have brushed or washed her hair? She looks like a crazy woman. And so I'm kind of like having these funny moments of critiquing that the body just didn't mean anything to me. And I was happy to leave it behind. And I just was looking up, and I floated up out of the ceiling of the hospital room. And I could see this tremendous white light, and I could see this long, long escalator. And I was so happy. I didn't see a tunnel like many people do. Many people describe walking through a tunnel. I don't think I could have done it. I was just so happy to get on the escalator, even though I was in pure soul form. I was like this white bouncy beach ball with all this little like energy, like little lightning going around inside it. It just felt so cool. But I remember being in that body form and just like leaning on the escalator railing on the right, going, I can just rest here. And the escalator took me up and up and up. And the moment I got up to the light, I just was looking around so excited and like so thrilled to be out of pain and no more doubt and no more problems, and like to be home. And about 20 beings of light came rushing to me. They were already right there at the top of the escalator, but they gave me this huge group hug. And it was those same angels. It was grandparents who'd passed on. There were some of my favorite animals from childhood. It was just like a real team was waiting there for me. And I realized they were not only giving me unconditional love and no judgment and support, but they were giving me energy, because I was out of gas. I was just completely out of gas. I don't think I would have made it through the surgery otherwise. I just had nothing left. And there was like one angel was spokesperson, and he just said to me, "You're welcome to stay home. We're so happy. We'll applaud you. We'll love you. You can just stay home. You're just so welcome to be here. There's no problem. There's no blame. There's no shame. You did nothing wrong." And I was like, "Oh, yay." But then he said, "Or you can choose to go back. And if you go back, you will survive the surgery. You will recover from it. You will have your baby. We want you to know your baby's going to survive too. So what do you want to do?" And he just gave me the choice. And I thought about it, and I said, "Will you tell me anything else about what my life will be?" And he said, "It's going to be very, very hard. It's going to be very hard for many years. You have to get on your life path. You're not on your life path. You're not doing what you came here to do." And I said, "Be more specific. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm 36 years old. I'm like this hardworking mom. I'm married. I'm in a difficult marriage. We're having our second child." And he wouldn't tell me anything more. He said, that's all we're going to tell you. You cannot go one more step here at home, or you won't be able to go back to the body. So I said, "I want to go back. I'm going back for my daughter, and I'm going back for this future baby. I don't know, boy or girl. I'm going back for my children." So they gave me another hug, put me back on the escalator, and I went back into my body, and I had a successful surgery. It was a surgery they'd never done. They had to use 2 OBGYNs. They had to research it. And it lasted many hours. And that's once they got in there, they discovered that it was the aorta. And so they stitched the uterus all back together and hoped to heck it would hold. And also said it was kind of amazing because they said that the baby, of course, is so tiny at 10 weeks, but they said, she was just as far away. She was real low. And they said we were just so careful not to go anywhere near the little fetus. And we hope your uterus is going to hold during your pregnancy, but we can't tell you what's going to happen. And we don't know what's going to happen during birth, because of course there's going to be tremendous pressure on it. And I'm like, oh, thanks guys. But you know, they had done just admirable and amazing work. And so I did go home after a couple of days, and I was so weak, I couldn't even walk up the stairs to go upstairs to the master bedroom. I had to sleep downstairs. And I rehabbed at home for about 6 weeks because it had been major surgery. And I went back to work. I went back to my same job, which I loved. Had been there for about 3 years. Great performance reviews. Guess what? Go back to work was late September, early November, laid off, just out of the blue. That was a big deal because I'm pregnant. I don't want to be looking for another job. And I carried the health insurance for the whole family. And how, you know, what am I going to do? And 1 week later, after I was laid off, my husband came home from work very late at night, and I could just tell by his face. And I said, what's wrong? What happened? And he said, I've just had to go to payless paydays. My company is tanking. He owned his own software company with several partners. It had been doing well. We had bought a new home not long ago. We had a live-in au pair. We had just bought a new van because we were going to have a second little baby. And our world just crumbled. I mean, our world absolutely crumbled because there's nothing worse than having to go to work and not being paid. So I'm looking at him going, why would you go to work when you're not being paid? And he said, because we've taken on contracts and we've got to complete the work. I can't not deliver the work. It's not ethical, and my reputation's going to be ruined. So obviously I've got to do the work. So it was rough. So he's at work like 60, 70 hours a week for no pay. I apply for unemployment and I say to him, okay, get your unemployment filed. And he's like, Wendy, I don't get unemployment. I'm self-employed. Like, what do you mean you don't get unemployment? This was a new concept to me. So we're down to he and I, the nanny, baby on the way, toddler, and we've got my unemployment, period. So it was just, you know, one of those perfect storms. And we went through quite a few of them. So that was kind of the precursor, but it didn't fully wake me up, but it was such an incredible experience and such a time date stamp for me that I did go back to it. So that all happened in 97. And then in 2010, the way I actually woke up spiritually is ridiculous. It's just the most ridiculous way possible. It's not like, you know, your beautiful experience with John of God, Gregg. It's what happened for me was I had been divorced for about 6 or 7 years, and I went on Match.com. That was my spiritual awakening because I met the soulmate that had the contract. I found later he had the soul contract to wake me up spiritually. And he had written a really unique dating profile. And the minute I saw his picture, the minute I was reading it, it's like I could finish the sentences. I'm like, who is this guy? I know this guy. We've met somewhere before. I know we've met. We'll figure it out. You know, we'll talk and we'll figure out where we met. And he had the same reaction to me. And what he'd written at the very end of his dating profile was, I am especially interested in meeting a woman who's on a spiritual journey, particularly one who's interested in an LBL. So I'm looking at it going, what's LBL? I better Google this and make sure it's not some weird drug reference. I better make sure this is okay. And LBL can stand for many things, but I found the right one right away. It was Life Between Lives, which is Dr. Michael Newton's 4-hour deep spiritual regression that one can do after successful past life regression. And you go home and you're in a pure soul state, you're not in a body. And it's all these adventures that you can have during the session to learn, what's my life purpose? What are my soul contracts with people? Why'd I come here? Why'd I choose this body? I mean, it's mind blowing. So he was prepping to have his second LBL within a few weeks of when he put this out. But that was an unusual thing to put in a dating profile.
Yeah.
And he'd also put in, I need to meet a woman. Hey, he had a good sense of self. A lot of people gave him a lot of flack for it. I need to meet a woman who's an excellent communicator, both verbal and written, with proper spelling and grammar. And I just howled. I burst out laughing when I read it. I'm like, is this a job description? Or is this a dating profile? Who is this dude?
Right.
Doesn't it turn out that he's a writer and that he and I had been married writers in previous lifetimes before? So of course, I'm the one that answers this dating profile because it just was so tailor-made for me. So it took us about 3 weeks to sync up schedules to meet. You know, we're both busy, and it was perfect because from the LBL reference, that took me to Dr. Michael Newton's bestseller, Journey of Souls. And I had time to get it from the library and to read it before we met. So we just were immediately jumping into that at that first lunch we had together. We were there for over 3 hours on a weekday. I mean, I sure had not planned that, nor had he. We both were like, oh my gosh, when we finally looked at our watches and we're both like late for our next things we needed to do. But that's what woke me up spiritually, was finding that person, who just had that contract to give me the kick in the pants that I needed, because I was not on that path. And it became so obvious what the angels had been talking about in the NDE. And when they said, life's going to be difficult and you've got to make some changes. So I really had, as I said, sadly I had gone through, we decided we needed to divorce, and, went through all that co-parenting. How do you do co-parenting with 2 little kids? They were only 6 and 8. So my ex-husband and I had to both really step to the plate and learn how to be very peaceful and respectful and kind, and to, just never share our differences in front of the girls. And that's hard to do. If you've got a troubled enough marriage that you're divorcing, how do you reach that kind of place? And I had reinvented my career. I'd gone into a really different line of work. I had built a home on my own with my mom. Actually, we built a duplex. We became the general contractors. I mean, it was just like big adventures had come up, and I had just, been mastering them with a lot of grace and a lot of help, from the divine. But through meeting that soulmate, the minute I read Journey of Souls in 2010, I knew I was meant to have a past life regression. So I just started trying to save my money for that. And, who do I go to? And he recommended the therapist for me and said, there's this amazing gal in Seattle, but I want to see her myself, but I'm not going to wait 6 months to see her. She's got that long a wait list. And I said, well, I will wait that long if she's the right person. So I, phone interviewed her and, did a lot of research, and she was the right person for me. And I had to save the money. So I was willing to wait. And at the end of, so that very first past life regression, here I go in, I am type A, I am tense, I have anxiety, I'm a little bit of a control freak. And she's like, oh God, what am I going to do with her? Can I just like smack her over the head to get her to chill out? I mean, I was not an easy subject, and I didn't have any background or any prep for it. And she had just asked me to just, take a couple of breaths and to really just try and settle down. And I was recording my own session because I didn't even trust her to record it. She'd invited me to really check out her office and make sure I was comfortable. There were no cameras. No one was going to interrupt us. She asked if I was okay with, did I want to lock the door so no one would walk in from the waiting room by mistake. She just was trying to make me feel really comfortable, because I was like a cat on a hot tin roof, is the best way I could describe what my energy was at that time, in 2011. And it was November 2011, which is 11/11 if you write it out. Lightworker awake. And I had agreed that it was just going to be an experiment. We were just going to see what happened. She was very upfront. I can't guarantee you're going to reach, therapeutic trance level. I can't guarantee you're going to see a past life or lives. We're just going to see how you do. And it was a big deal for me to plunk over that money for that, because I was just on a, super strict budget. It was a leap of faith, but it was fabulous. In those 2 hours, I let go of 49 years worth of anxiety. I mean, that is amazing. And traditional talk therapy had never touched it for me. It had not really helped with that. I didn't need medication, but I had enough anxiety. It was a buzzkill every day. It just, was like, I knew I wasn't living my life because I wasn't feeling like, the courage. I wasn't feeling the, yeah, let's just go for it. I didn't have that kind of energy at all. It was always like, oh, what's going to go wrong with this? And there's going to be problems. And it was just too much of that type of energy. So to be able to release that anxiety, it changed things, because she took me back to 2 scenes earlier in my present life that I didn't know I was really still hung up on, from when I was 12 and from when I was about 1. So I sure didn't remember the episode when I was 1. But she took me back through those, and then just gently took me back to the mother's womb. And now let's go to a previous, earlier, meaningful life. She didn't say go to, your most recent, just go to a meaningful, more further back in time. So she's kind of floating me back along a timeline, was the visualization. I saw 2 past lives in a lot of detail. They were incredibly helpful. And she was able to help me connect the dots of, here were my problems with authority. And when she first said to me at the end of it, wow, we just saw an interesting lifetime where you had this episode with the police. It was a Bobby in London back in the maybe late 1700s, early 1800s. And there was a man stealing food to survive. And I was just wealthy, young woman, and I knew it was wrong, but I straight up lied to the Bobby when, he's like, did you see him? Where'd he go? And I helped him get away, because it just, wasn't pre-planned at all. But I just knew it wasn't right. There was no safety net for people. There was no work. And being poor was a crime, basically. I knew about debtor's prison and those sorts of things, and I didn't think it was right. So that was one. And yeah, that is an issue with authority in some ways, because the government wasn't serving the people. And then the second life was even more shocking to me, because I was in a male body, and that threw me off. Because I was like, oh, I must be looking at someone else because it's a man. And I'm like, oh, no, that's me. And I realized my point of view was in the body. And I was chained to a prison wall in a lot of misery. And I realized over time it was Spanish Inquisition. And my crime had been trying to save some books that were being burned. And more importantly than that, I had been teaching people how to read and write. And that was not allowed, because knowledge is power. So, the therapist rightly said, so Wendy, do you have problems with authority after seeing these 2 past lives? And I'm like, no, I don't. What are you talking about? So she just helped me start to peel the onion on that and get some healing around that and some processing around it. And I looked her straight in the eye at the end of it and said, this has changed my life. These 2 hours, I cannot tell you how positive this was. And I'm so grateful. And I'm ready to sign up for a life between lives, because I knew that was the path for me, and from my boyfriend, what he'd experienced with the 2 of them and reading Newton's books. And she looked at me and she said, that's a really advanced technique. I recommend you have about another 12 PLRs, past life regressions first, like a monthly program. And I said, no, it won't happen. I'll be honest, I won't be able to afford it financially or time-wise. Will you please sign me up? And she said, again, I'd love to, but I don't want you to waste your money. It's a significant investment to pay for a life between lives. I don't want you to waste your money. you need to do more. You need to learn how to meditate. So then we started going down the track of what else can I do on my own to prep for the life between lives. So I did manage to talk her into it. That was the first time she'd ever done that. And we put it on her calendar for a year in the future. And she says, I've never booked anybody out this far, but I was starting to hear my guides and they were saying, book it for a year from now. We'll help you. We'll figure it out. So I just was repeating what I was hearing. And I did go, and the Life Between Lives was amazing. When I wrote out the recording from it, I had 65 pages of information to help me. So it had all come from me, because in these types of sessions, the therapists, they're not doing a psychic reading. They're not doing a past life reading. They're getting you to relax to where you can access your subconscious, your soul, your higher self, your guides. They're just helping you bring that information out and interpret it and gently put the pieces together, what the possibilities might be. And I then the next year, so these two sessions were with a Newton therapist. The next year in the Path Upon Awakening was I met a Dolores Cannon quantum healing hypnotherapist, and I did 2 sessions with her. We'd only planned one. She came in from out of town and was visiting, but it was so powerful. We did one at the end of her trip too, before she went back out of state. And I knew after that, I'm supposed to train. I'm supposed to help people in this manner, because I just took to it like a duck to water. Like I said, with no indicator that I would be a good subject, I turned out to be this incredible trance subject and could also lead people there really easily and gently, and just saw it as just such a privilege. And I wasn't concerned or nonplussed or bothered in any way, whatever came up for people, if they had been a rapist, a murderer, if they had been infamous. I was able to just gently say, we all have been. It's okay. We've got to figure out why you did that and let go, get the lesson, forgive yourself, forgive the others, and let go of the blame, the shame, let go of the low vibration energy around it. So I just started attracting people who'd had famous lives too, lives on other planets, just all kinds of things that were kind of unusual and out there. But it just, the spiritual awakening just kept going from there, because it's a process. It's not this, snap your fingers and now I'm awake. Nemo took the red pill or the blue pill in Matrix. It doesn't quite work like that.
Right. Wow. Okay. So I didn't know any of that. So that was...
It was all Match.com.
Boy, some stories. Well, the near-death stuff is crazy.
Yeah.
That in particular. I knew a little bit about meeting your, I guess what some people will call a twin flame, somebody, a soulmate, whatever, somebody you're matched up to who will awaken you. That's what it, for people who know what twin flames are, it's not always the easiest relationships, but you meet in this lifetime to trigger each other for better and for worse, really. But it's all about learning, teaching each other, because you've signed up for it in another life. So that's definitely what you experienced.
And I, like you, Gregg, I had some readings along the way that just didn't make sense to me. And I thought, this person, they may be great, they're doing their best, but I don't believe I'm supposed to write books. I don't believe I'm supposed to become a spiritual teacher. I mean, it was just, and it was amazing how all those things came true within a couple years, as I, kept getting more and more on my path. And I did go back to every single person and apologized and validated the sessions, because I gave them a lot of flack and said, you got the wrong chick. There is no way. It's just, you're really off today. I got to tell you, I know you're doing your best, but I don't resonate with any of this. This is not possible. Are you doing a reading for someone else? Because it's not me that you're talking about. So that was part of, I did need to go back and validate and apologize to people.
That was nice of you. Well, We're almost at an hour. We're about 10
Oh
minutes
my
away from
goodness.
being an hour. So,
Any comments or questions? I realize it's a weekday and people may be off doing the real world stuff that they need to do. Is there any of that, Greg, that you see, or
no,
are
just a
we
couple of
clear?
nice, nice comments about some people. One person who's read my book saying it's a good
Oh,
book.
wonderful.
So that's very nice. So, and you've written some books too. Do you want to talk about yours? Because yours are
Sure.
related to the past lives that you've uncovered.
Yes. The first one, I'll just hold it up. I'm going to block my face here for a sec. So, Regression Healing 1, the huntsman, the Lord High Mayor, and the World War II soldier. This is actually the session that I did with that soulmate who woke me up. And he had severe physical chronic pain, daily pain. He had been a professional athlete in a high contact sport. He'd just been an adventurer and he'd broken his neck. I mean, he had physical pain there, and he didn't want to take painkillers, he didn't want to take medication, but he wanted to enjoy life and be active. So I suggested to him and said, you know, would you like me to do a session for you? Are you comfortable with that? Or do we know each other too well? Because we, by that time, had found 19 past lives together. And we were no longer dating. We'd broken up years before. So I wasn't, sure how he'd feel about it. But he jumped at the chance. And my guide said, this is going to be the most difficult session you're ever going to do. And so I naturally said, am I meant to do it? Is it good for me? Is it good for him? Is it meant to be done now? Will you help me, through the session? And I was getting yes, yes, yes on all of that. And I did share with him, hey, you need to know this came up, for me. You need to be doing your checking too. Don't let me talk you into anything. And he said, no, there's nothing to lose. It can only get better from here. And my guides told me specifically, you need to double record. And I barely knew what that was. I wasn't great with the technology. Usually, I was a traveling hypnotherapist originally. I would go to people's homes and I had an MP3 player. And so I knew the MP3 player was working, but I also turned my iPhone. I had a new iPhone. I also turned the recorder on that on, having no idea that it couldn't record that long because his session was 4.5 hours. So when I went to turn the MP3 on to transfer it onto his computer so he'd have his tape, not a word was there beyond the testing. We both said that to just check volume for both of us. And there was nothing beyond that. But I saw the red light on it the whole time, and so did he. So we're like, what's that about? So it was an interesting energy interference. Luckily, I was warned. So I had also recorded on my phone. So by now my heart's beating, oh, please let it be on the phone. Let it have recorded there. Because when I asked him at the end of the session, how long do you think that session was? His answer was, oh, it went longer than I thought. It was about 2 hours. I'm like, buddy, look at the clock. It was 4.5 hours. And that's really important. Because what that means, that kind of lost time, because time's different on the other side, it meant there were 2.5 hours of information that he didn't consciously know. And he'd been able to connect with his guides, and he'd been able to connect with his father who'd passed on. He'd gotten so much advice, and I knew he didn't know about it consciously. But I couldn't hand him my phone. I needed my phone, and neither of us had time to sit there and listen to it that day or another day. So it's like, okay, let me try and transfer it off the phone. I go to the phone store and they're like, how in the world did you record for 4.5 hours? The recording app only works for 30 minutes. But I had a 4.5 hour recording on there that they couldn't get off and couldn't explain. And you could hear clearly, as clear as a bell, both of us the whole way through. So I'm like, oh, brother, what do I do? He really needs this info. And I need to get it off my chest because some really powerful things happened during the session that involved both of us. And so I decided to type just a real quick and dirty transcript. Just put our first names, what we said, don't worry about quotes and spelling and, just rip it out. I did that for about 2 hours on a Saturday. I'm transcribing and you got to stop the recording and, it's not always at the right level. I'm not a court stenographer. And I looked down at my document after that 2 hours, and I was shocked because I thought it would just be what each of us had said with our names. And instead it had the title. It had my name as the author. It said table of contents. It said note, make sure to write a forgiveness resource guide at the end of the book. And I'm looking at it going, you're a book. And that was amazing to me because I was so blocked. I knew I was supposed to be writing. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to start. I had written 1,200 pages and had not known what to do with it. It was just like this purge of all these spiritual experiences and all these waking up, things that were going on that I didn't know how to keep track of them all. They were so intense, so many questions, so many experiences. All my sessions with healers, all my past life regressions were all getting transcribed just for myself, I thought, because I didn't know what to do with them. And then this little book got born, and that was part of his gift to me, was he helped me get published. And because I contacted him and said, what do I do? Are you okay with me sharing this publicly? Change your name, change your identity. I want you to read it. I want you to change anything you're not comfortable with, because there's nothing more personal than a 4.5-hour conversation with your soul. Who is generous enough to allow someone else to publish that? So that was that was one of his amazing gifts to me. There were many, but that was certainly one of them. So that's what got the first book. And I did, my guide said it is Regression Healing 1. It kicks off a series. And same thing when I did write my first novel, same thing. It sets up a trilogy. It's the Flow, Plymouth Plantation. It's metaphysical, historic fiction set in colonial America, but it's my past life there. And that's where that 1,200 pages is going to be 3 more books. It's a trilogy comes after that. But first, I'm going to publish Regression Healing 2, Joe and Marilyn, which is taking years to do and a lot of courage to do, because there's such flack comes up around famous past lives, and it's people get overly energized on the topic so often. I can't prove that the client who had these multiple sessions with all these detailed memories of Joe DiMaggio, and she's a middle-aged woman who did not follow baseball and who's, just didn't have this knowledge, yet all these details came up around his life. And same thing, it's a different client who had these memories since she was a preschooler that appeared to be Marilyn Monroe. And that one I know is especially controversial because there's so many people. I think it's the divine feminine coming back in a very beautiful, gracious way, is why there's so much of the Mary Magdalene, Marilyn Monroe, perhaps Cleopatra, whoever else. I think it's the divine feminine. But that will be the next book, is Regression Healing 2, Joe and Marilyn.
Very, very cool. Very interesting. Fascinating. Well,
so blocked authors take hope, because Gregg, you were 10 years writing your first one, and this one was easy because it was the transcript. So this was less than a year to go through that full process. But the Flow one, Plymouth Plantation, I had so much energy in that lifetime, so stuck. That took me 5 years to write, because I'd have to keep putting it on the back burner because I just couldn't get through the next hurdle. And then I'd have a healing or a breakthrough or an epiphany. I'd keep waking up spiritually, because that's what we've really been trying to say today, is it's a process. Just be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself. You can only go as fast as you can go. And sometimes you just have to put it aside for 3 months or 6 months and just, let it go, and just chop wood and carry water.
Yep.
And, take care of your family and take care of your friends and take care of yourself, and keep working on those daily spiritual practices, and just keep loving yourself and working on your own health, and if it's the diet changes or whatever you need, because I think we've all had those. As we raise our vibration, our diets can really change considerably, and we've got to really learn how to ground and clear our energy. So please, if anyone's tuning in this time for the first time, do go back and check out those earlier podcasts on managing your energy, because you can't raise your vibration well without getting scattered and just airy-fairy. And you've got to be able to drive, you've got to be able to earn your living, you've got to be able to file your taxes on time. Remember to go to the mailbox. You got to be able to do the chop wood, carry water.
Exactly. Yes. All right.
Anything to add, Gregg?
No, just other than I'm working on a future book too, but
oh, please tell us a little bit about that, or not ready to talk about it yet.
Well, I'm just compiling information, so I didn't want to do a part 2 to the gratitude curve, but it kind of, some things have kind of worked out that way, but it's more or less, looks like it's shaping up to be in the style of a Brian Weiss or Dolores Cannon, where I'm getting so much information from the sessions I'm doing that's outside of just personal, stuff, like personal healing stuff. I'm getting
your client sessions that you're doing with other people. Mm-hmm.
Yes, especially just in the past 6 months, the remote energy work I've been doing is really it's gotten a lot more interesting. Things are changing energetically with the world and the universe anyway, but stuff is coming up, and the interactions I'm having with people, there's so much knowledge coming through the sessions, through the guides.
Yes.
That's not just related to personal healing. It's related to, healing the planet and and the souls who are passing through it. So, I'm in the information gathering mode now, but
sure.
my mind is being blown every day with this information. So I'm sharing it in dribs and drabs. I shared a little bit of it on our Facebook page recently.
Yes. Well, you're an amazing practitioner, Gregg, and you're a great writer. So I know that's going to be really wonderful, because I so appreciate the sessions that you've done for me over the years. And just to be able to get things squared away in a half an hour, you've kind of been my energy, my spiritual ER more than once, because
love it.
It's been like, I can't take this lower back pain. There's a problem. Something's wrong, and I can't clear it. I can't figure out what's going on. Or I'd contact you and say, Gregg, I can't walk. Something's wrong with my hips. There's just, what's going on here? Or the stomach things.
Keep getting in car accidents.
Right. Right.
Yep.
I went through, that was part of my spiritual awakening. I had trouble driving, and I'd had a perfect driving record for 30 plus years. And then I had like 3 or 4 different car accidents. And, finally I had a car collision that totaled my car, and had to deal with all kinds of authority around that. And I said to my angels, what's this about? Because I ask for your protection, and you tell me, and I believe you, and I know in my heart I'm protected. And they said, we needed to take your car away. We needed you to have that collision to let go and to deal with authority, because I had to call the police, had to deal with the tow truck driver, had to go to court. And I would never have looked for those experiences. And they were very positive. I had to, negotiate the settlement on what the car was worth. So it was so much. And that's what the angels said. They said, we needed to just get you to resolve those issues with authority, and we chose to take your car. That was the best efficient way to do it. And I was fine. I was not hurt. It was amazing, because 3 of the 6 airbags went off. It was a serious collision, but I was protected.
Yep.
So
we found the reason that those things were being attracted to you too.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Let's just wrap up. And I so appreciate Diane and Jim and other people that have been here with us listening, and want to thank you for your time, and would love to have your comments, your questions, and anyone, of course, who is listening on the archive. Please put your questions. Let us know how we can help support your spiritual awakening and just those weird things you can't quite figure out, because Gregg and I both went through so many of them that we love to help others with it. So again, my website is wendyrosewilliams.com, and just so grateful to have everybody here, and to Gregg for doing this having this conversation with me.
Yes, likewise. And I'm at Gregg Kirk, it's spelled GreggKirk.com, and look for us in about 2 weeks. And we'll announce it on our website as well, at wakingupspiritually.com.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.